Have you ever come across something really unexpected that kind of makes you rethink a complex problem?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Well, today we're diving into a paper that does exactly that. It's actually being used in some business schools to explore, how organizations handle big changes, like when they have to shift gears.
It's not your typical business school case study, that's for sure.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
This paper, get this, it's called Organizational Change and Abjection, a systems-psychodynamic reflection of Millie Brown's Nexus Vomitus.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful.
A bit, but hey, it grabs your attention, right?
It does.
And it's not from some random journal either. It's published online in Practicing Social Change, which is put out by the National Training Laboratory.
ENTL, yeah.
They're a real powerhouse in the world of behavioral science, cutting-edge stuff.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting about this paper is how it tackles this whole issue of change. You see, the author, a professor, he uses this, a pretty controversial art performance by Millie Brown to get his students thinking about the messy stuff, the discomfort, the resistance, and, the role of the people trying to make the change happen. Those change agents.
So we're talking about using art, controversial art, to teach about organizational change.
Exactly.
That's a new one for me. Tell me more about this performance.
Okay, so the performance is called, and get ready for this, Nexus Vomitus.
Okay, Nexus Vomitus. That's
It's a lot, right? It was from 2011, and Millie Brown, she's known for this style called abject art. She collaborated with 2 opera singers. And the thing that makes this so unique, so intense, is that Brown creates a painting right there on stage, live, using, vomit.
Okay, wow, that's quite the visual. So help me understand this. Why bring something so, provocative into a business school? What's the goal here?
It's about getting these future leaders to think differently, to feel it in their gut. The professor who wrote the paper says it's all about confronting a core tension in organizational change. You have to shake things up, disrupt how things are to move forward. But that disruption, it often makes people dig in their heels, resist, even reject the whole change process and the person leading it.
Ah, that classic double-edged sword. You have to push to make progress, but pushing too hard can backfire. What resonates most with you as you think about change in your own work?
It's the human element, really seeing how people react, how they feel. And the paper gets into that, not just the theory. It's got reflections from actual students who went through this exercise, so it's a practical tool for other educators. It could even be used in management training, though the author does say you got to approach it carefully. It's intense stuff.
I can imagine. So if I were in this class, I'd be watching this Nexus Vomitus performance. Yeah. Like as homework.
Exactly. It's about creating a short experience, something everyone can connect to launch a deeper conversation.
Got it. A common ground, but a pretty wild one. So we've got this, intense performance as the centerpiece. How does the paper actually use it to explain what happens when organizations try to change?
This is where the concept of abject art comes in, something a theorist named Julia Kristeva developed. Think about it this way. Have you ever felt that gut-wrenching disgust, like a deep revulsion to something that just crosses a line, makes you question what's normal, what's acceptable? That's the abject.
Like that visceral reaction when something violates a deep-seated social taboo, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And Millie Brown's performance, it uses bodily fluids, stuff we usually consider taboo.
Yeah.
It's pushing those boundaries, making people uncomfortable, forcing them to confront these norms head on. It's like when you encounter a new policy at work, something that just feels wrong, deeply wrong, and you react almost instinctively against it.
Okay, I see the connection. It's one thing to understand that people resist change, but it's another to feel it, to experience it on that gut level. How does the paper use this discomfort, this abject feeling, to shed light on organizational change?
The paper argues that by confronting these intense reactions, to the artwork, students can develop a much stronger sense of empathy for what others experience during organizational change. It moves beyond just the logical reasons for resistance and gets to the emotional core of it.
So by feeling that unease, they can better understand, maybe even navigate, the unease they might face when they're leading change.
Precisely. And there's another layer here. Think about it, the act of painting with vomit. It's blurring the lines between the artist, the tools, and the art itself. Brown, she isn't using a brush, her body is directly involved. This speaks to a big part of being a change agent. You're not some detached observer, you're in the system, you're influencing it and being influenced by it.
It's like you're both the artist and the canvas at the same time. How does that blurring of boundaries relate to, someone trying to lead change in a company or organization?
It makes you think about how much a change agent gets caught up in the system. Can they stay objective, or do they get too emotionally involved? It also highlights something we often overlook: the well-being of the change agent themselves. They're not just robots executing a plan. They're people, too, with their own emotions, their own struggles.
So this performance, as unsettling as it is, it's a powerful metaphor for the relationship between someone trying to make change happen and the organization they're working within.
Exactly. It pushes students and all of us, really, to look beyond those surface-level strategies, the bullet points in a presentation. It's about understanding the deeper psychological and emotional currents, the stuff that's often hidden but drives how people actually react.
Makes sense. Now, who is this teaching approach aimed at? What kind of students is this professor working with?
He's teaching master's level students, MBA candidates, and those in executive programs, all focusing on change management. The folks likely to be in leadership roles, driving those big transformations in their careers.
And how does he actually present this in a classroom? It sounds like walking a tightrope, getting people to think, but not freaking them out.
He's very deliberate about it. He usually shows just a short clip of the video, maybe 5 minutes or so, but often even less, like 2 or 3 minutes, then pauses it. It's about managing the intensity, the tension in the room, because it can get really uncomfortable.
It makes sense to ease people into it. Too much too soon, and they might shut down completely.
Right. It's about finding that sweet spot, enough discomfort to make them think, but not enough to make them run for the hills. And the timing matters, too. He introduces it fairly early in the session after some groundwork, building a little trust. Too late, and it might not land as hard. Too early, and, well, it could be a shock to the system.
So you're trying to find that balance where it's thought-provoking without being overwhelming.
Exactly. Now, he's mindful of potential sensitivities, too. Emetophobia, the fear of vomiting. He makes a discreet announcement at the start, letting people know they can step out if they need to. Interestingly, he says no one's actually done that yet.
I also read about vomit bags being placed on the seats. That's a choice. What's the point of that?
Yeah, that's straight from the paper. It's intentional, a way to spark curiosity, from the get-go. And to remind them viscerally what they're about to see, it definitely sets the tone, lets them know this isn't going to be a typical lecture.
Not at all. He specifically avoids trigger warnings, right? Why is that?
He explains that the absence of a trigger warning can actually open up a really good discussion about the stress that comes with change. Can you have truly impactful change without any stress? He suggests that often you can't. This leads to a conversation about the role of change agents, about pushing people beyond their comfort zones, even if it causes some discomfort.
So the lack of warning becomes a lesson in itself, a reminder that change can be messy, it can be uncomfortable.
Precisely. And what's really interesting is that this approach encourages reflection on multiple levels, all connected. First, you've got the professor himself. He's the change agent, right, disrupting the usual classroom dynamic. Then you have the students experiencing that disruption firsthand. And then there's Millie Brown in the performance. She's the change agent disrupting the art world. And lastly, you have those opera singers representing the established system being impacted.
It's like looking at change through these different lenses all at the same time.
Yeah.
By seeing it play out in the performance, they can start to connect it to their own experiences, right?
Exactly. It's about finding those parallels between this very intense artistic expression and the, maybe less dramatic, but just as emotionally charged dynamics that happen in organizations.
So what's the big takeaway? What does the professor really want his students to walk away with?
It's more than just knowing why people resist change. He wants them to develop self-awareness, to look inward, to understand their own biases, how they react to disruption, and how that impacts others during transitions. They need to understand themselves as instruments of change, not just people carrying out a plan.
It's like becoming aware of your own role in the change process, right?
Yeah.
How you influence it, how you're influenced by it.
Precisely. And the paper points out this fascinating duality in the performance. Some elements can be seen as good or bad, depending on your perspective. This encourages students to question their own assumptions, to move away from that black and white thinking, good leader versus bad leader. It's about recognizing that even opposing forces can be connected and play a role in how change unfolds.
So when those students first watch this video, what's their reaction? What do they do? What do they say?
Initially, it's a mix of confusion, mostly because it's so unexpected. Even if the professor's shown them a still image beforehand, the movement, the sound, it's different. There's a lot of curiosity, that what am I getting myself into feeling. But many say they don't really feel anything strong until the video actually starts playing.
So that delayed reaction, that's interesting. It's like they're processing it, trying to make sense of it.
Right, and it's like how organizational change sometimes unfolds. Things can be in motion for a while before people truly grasp the impact. Once the video starts, you see a range of reactions. Some students laugh, almost nervously, like a release of tension, a way to cope. Some focus on how others are reacting, almost like they're trying to distance themselves from the content.
I can see that. When something makes you uncomfortable, you look for ways to deflect, to make it less personal.
Exactly. But even those who laugh, you can see the discomfort building as the video goes on. The professor actually puts the remaining time on the screen so they know it's going to end. They can get through it.
That makes sense, knowing it's not going to last forever.
Right. Then you have others who can even watch. They turn away, cover their eyes, try to hide. This is interesting because it's a very outward physical display of disgust, even rejection, not just of the video, but maybe of the professor for showing it.
So it's a visible, almost physical manifestation of that resistance we were talking about earlier.
Precisely. And this ties into a key point the paper makes. In a classroom, you get these very clear, almost exaggerated reactions. But in organizations, it's often much more subtle. It's not people turning away from a presentation. It's more like, agreeing verbally, but undermining the initiative behind the scenes. They might be violently polite, but ultimately resistant.
It's like resistance going underground, making it much harder to spot, to address, to understand the true impact.
Exactly. Now, the paper doesn't stop there. It goes on to analyze specific parts of the performance, offering different interpretations, acknowledging that some might be subjective, but it's all about sparking discussion and reflection.
Let's dive into that. What about those opera singers? What role do they play in this whole change management metaphor?
Right. So you've got the singers representing tradition, the status quo, and then you have Millie Brown, the artist, challenging those traditions with her, unusual art. Even visually, they're different. The singers, they're in white turtlenecks, they blend in, they're performing this traditional flower duet, but without much passion, reading from sheet music.
So they're like those people in an organization who just want to keep things as they are, who resist any change or disruption.
Yeah, that's a key interpretation. Their detachment, their clinging to the familiar routine, it reflects those who dig in their heels when faced with change. The paper even suggests they might represent, a group that's lost its purpose, just going through the motions.
And their physical presence, they're almost secondary to Millie Brown, right?
Yeah. They're off to the side, partially hidden. They seem to have less power, less agency than Brown, the change agent. They're almost passive observers, unable to interact directly with what she's doing. But there's another way to see it, too. They're singing, it's beautiful, familiar, and it might actually ease the audience's discomfort, like a distraction from the, unsettling stuff.
So amidst the chaos and discomfort, their music is a reminder of stability, of the familiar.
Exactly. And it's interesting, they're singing about these invisible flowers, right? And then Brown brings them to life on the canvas with her vomit, creating this link between tradition and this very modern, very unexpected art form.
The paper also gets into some, deep interpretations of the flowers themselves, right?
It does. Flowers, they can symbolize a lot of things. Love, longing, even puberty, a time of major change and growth, often stressful growth. It's connecting those universal human experiences to the upheaval of organizational change. There's also the idea that the singers might be projecting their discomfort, even aggression, onto Brown, who then processes it and expels it through her art.
It's like she's taking on their anxieties and transforming them. What about the singer's apparent lack of reaction to what she's doing? It's almost like they're ignoring her.
There are a couple of ways to see that. Maybe they're so focused on their performance, maintaining their composure, that they block out everything else. Or, as one student suggested, it's like they're priests trying to perform an exorcism, sticking to the ritual even as something unsettling persists.
Let's shift gears now and talk about Millie Brown herself. How is she presented as a change agent?
Brown represents something different, something that's often hidden or rejected, what Carl Jung called the shadow. She stands out from the opera singers, both in what she's wearing and how she's moving. She's moving freely, disrupting the formality of the setting.
The paper describes her movements as graceful, but also provocative, even arrogant at times.
Yes, and that's a common reaction. Students often focus on her facial expressions, seeing them as detached or even arrogant, and that sparks discussion about how change agents are sometimes perceived, as not caring about the people they're affecting. But here's the thing. Millie Brown has spoken openly about how her performances impact her health, how demanding they are. It reminds us that even those pushing for change are often carrying burdens we don't see.
So behind that perceived arrogance, there might be struggle, even sacrifice.
Exactly. The paper also points out her precision, her control, even in something as chaotic as this. She carefully lines up the straws before drinking the colored milk, showing that even within chaos, there can be intentionality, like when you plan a change initiative carefully.
And there's some subtle ways she connects with the existing system too, right?
Yes. It's interesting. Her fingernails, they're painted white, the same color as the room, the singer's clothes. It's subtle, but it suggests a connection, a bridge between her and the system she's disrupting.
Even though she's the one disrupting everything, her actions are ultimately contained on the canvas. What's the significance of that?
That's important. It's saying that even radical change often happens within boundaries, focused on a specific part of the system. But even contained change can feel huge to those directly impacted. It makes you think about what's enough change, what's too much, and when it feels genuine, not just for show.
It's like saying even small changes can ripple outward and create a much larger impact.
Exactly. So Millie Brown, she's complex. She's assertive, methodical, she pushes boundaries, and she endures hardship, all to create something new. It's a powerful image of the change agent, even if what they create is open to interpretation, even debate.
Let's talk about the painting process itself, the actual act of creation.
Yeah.
How does the paper analyze that?
Think about it. She's taking something we usually find repulsive, vomit, and turning it into art. It's transforming the unwanted into something, potentially beautiful, or at least something that makes you think. This fusion of opposites is what the paper calls complementary opposites.
And the way she does it, it's so personal. She's literally a part of the artwork.
Absolutely. Her body is the brush, mixing the colors with her bodily fluids. She's physically, viscerally embedded in the art. This brings us back to Julia Kristeva's ideas about objection. How we expel waste to maintain order, cleanliness, boundaries.
So the vomiting, it could be seen as cleansing, a way to create space by getting rid of what's unwanted.
That's one way to see it. It can also be about taking things in, processing them, and then forcefully rejecting them, kind of like how we deal with difficult emotions or experiences. It's important to remember, though, Brown talks about the physical toll, the side effects she experiences. So even though she seems in control, there's a cost, a personal cost to this kind of creative disruption.
The paper quotes Brown talking about how grueling it is, how much preparation is involved.
It's intense. Days of emptying her stomach, the performance itself lasts for 2 hours, the physical demands, it's all very real. This reframes her, she's not just a provocateur, she's someone pushing limits, enduring hardship, and that raises questions about the limits of pushing yourself and others for the sake of change.
It highlights the often hidden cost of disrupting the status quo, even if it's for a good cause. So after all of this, watching the performance, discussing it, how does the professor connect this back to the real world, to what these students might face in their careers?
He brings it back to their reality by asking them, how does this relate to what you'll face in business? He uses the discussion to introduce key change management concepts building on what they've just experienced.
So what are some of the key concepts that usually come out of this discussion?
One of the big ones is disturbing equilibrium, that idea that you have to shake things up, disrupt the comfort zone to create real change. He connects this to models of system equilibrium, how organizations naturally seek balance. And then there's the energy input needed to make that change happen. Like the video itself, it's that injection of energy into the system.
It's like you're adding a catalyst to get things moving.
Right. And he talks about psychophysics, finding that minimum amount of change that's noticeable, that makes an impact. Too little, and it's ignored. Too much, and the system might break down.
So it's a balancing act, finding that tipping point between too much and not enough.
Exactly. And there's the idea of rejection of the disruptor, the risk that the change agent, the professor in this case, might be rejected for making people uncomfortable. It can damage relationships that leader-member trust. It's a paradox. Disruption is necessary for change, but it can also be what prevents it from happening.
The paper also mentions the time frame of change, how long it takes.
Yeah, right. He uses the video clip, which is short, and the full performance, which is much longer, to talk about how long organizations can handle change before people get burned out, before they reach their limit. He links this to concepts like the adaptation to change curve. It's about pacing change thoughtfully so people can adapt without breaking down.
And he also talks about, the fact that not everyone can handle change, no matter how well it's managed.
It's a difficult reality. Some people just won't survive major change. It'll be too much. The vomit bag analogy comes back here. It's a reminder that sometimes you need to provide support, make space for people to step away. He emphasizes checking in with those who seem fine on the surface, because losing their buy-in can really undermine the whole effort.
That's a good reminder to look beneath the surface, because people often hide their struggles, especially at work.
Exactly. And to wrap things up, the professor does something really clever. In a later session, he plays the flower duet again, the music from the performance.
So the music becomes a trigger, reminding them of what they felt watching the video.
Exactly. It's an instant visceral reminder connecting them back to that discomfort, and it shows how small things can trigger bigger reactions based on past experiences, especially with change.
It's a powerful way to reinforce the learning by making it not just intellectual, but emotional and memorable.
Absolutely.
This has been a fascinating look at a really unique approach to teaching about change. Using this performance, Nexus Vomitus, as a way to explore the dynamics of change, the discomfort, the resistance, the role of the change agent, it's really thought-provoking.
It's amazing how something so extreme can shed light on the often hidden emotional and psychological aspects of what happens in organizations, the human side of change.
And it makes you wonder, what are the more subtle, maybe even abject things that happen in organizations that we often don't acknowledge, things that impact performance in ways we don't even realize?
Yeah.
That's something for all of us to think about as we navigate change, both personally and professionally.
A lot to unpack there, that's for sure.
Thanks for joining us today for this deep dive into this truly unique paper.
It's been a pleasure.